in many interviews, I've been keen to tell people that there wasn't a pandemic, there wasn't a public health emergency, there was nothing unusual happening. Sometimes I'll refer to the numbers of people, going into hospital or dying of things. But I've got something I think is more useful. In order for an emergency to be declared, like a fire or like a shark approaching a public beach, holiday beach, would you agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that before you would call out the fire engines, you'd probably be smelling smoke somewhere, someone would be, or a fire smoke alarm will go off. Before you would call shark alerts and get everybody off the beach, you would think someone would have seen a fin, yeah? Or someone in a helicopter said, hey, I can see some sharks approaching the beach. What I'm telling you is before an emergency is called, there is already an event at some level that someone is able to see, to detect and warn you about, and you think, oh, that was really good that they warned us. In the case of the pandemic, that nice man at the WHO, Tedros, clever he may be, but he's not a fortune teller. He doesn't have foresight. He hasn't got long-range binoculars. He's not got a time machine. In order to declare a pandemic, which I think he did in 2020, March, whatever it was, he has to have some evidence of that. There's a little problemette, ladies and gentlemen. Not just me, but Dennis Rancourt in Canada and many other researchers have looked for signs of illness, respiratory illness, which surely would be growing somewhere in a small way in order that the WHO from their esteemed exalted position could aggregate all that data and go, oh my word, it looks like there's something like a pandemic beginning. There is nowhere in the world that you can find increased frequency of respiratory illness and respiratory deaths anywhere until after the WHO called a pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, they called a pandemic with no evidence of a pandemic because they were lying to you. They were lying to you. Then they created all our governments created the impression of a pandemic by misusing a test that doesn't measure what it says, PCR. There's literally, what we had is a pandemic, a rollout of the test. It's as simple as that. Increased number of cases everywhere was a pandemic of a rollout of a rubbish test. It's not a mistake. They knew it was rubbish. They designed it to be rubbish. They designed it to produce positives where there was no illness. And then when people died, they said, oh, they had COVID. They literally did that. And then, I'm afraid, medical procedures in care homes and hospitals led to people being killed. But this is old news. You've heard all this before. I just wanted to tell you, you can't have an emergency without some sign of that emergency emerging somewhere. You need that information in order, as a leader, to say, I'm afraid, folks, I've got bad news. There's an emergency coming, batten down the hatches. For these pandemics, they just lied to you. Nothing was happening. If you go and look for it, you'll not find the evidence. They called the pandemic, and then the data started arriving, which was fraudulent. So it's as simple as that.